Today I would like to talk about and attempt to clarify one of the central concepts in Buddhist discourse, the idea of dukkha, in part because it's, I think, commonly misunderstood. Dukkha is very central to the Buddhist teaching, and it's one of those words that's elusive of an exact translation. It's most commonly translated as suffering. So we get the Four Noble Truths, which all contain the word dukkha, translated as the truth of suffering, the truth of the origin of suffering, the truth of the end of suffering, and the truth of the path leading to the end of suffering. And being so central to the teaching, the Four Noble Truths, taken as various expressions around suffering, leads people to view Buddhism as being pessimistic or negative kind of philosophy. Suffering is not an adequate translation. It works in some contexts, but not in others. Truth is, there is no one English word that works all the time. Other suggestions have been made. Stress, this is Bhikkhu Tenisaro's translation. So he talks about the truth of stress, the truth of origin of stress, and so on. Unsatisfactoriness is another one that has been suggested. It's quite a cumbersome word, but it does point up to an aspect. Imperfection is another possible one. Dukkha is an aspect of all conditioned things. Everything in our experience of the six senses, everything in body and mind, every moment, every element has as one of its features, it has a characteristic of dukkha. The only thing that is not dukkha is the unconditioned, nibbana. But everything conditioned is characterized by dukkha. There are said to be three kinds of dukkha. There's dukkha dukkata, dukkha viparinama, and dukkha sankhata. Dukkha dukkata, we could say, is like dukkha as dukkha, or dukkha per se. This is the kind that is adequately translated as suffering. Any experience of body or mind that is felt as painful. So stepping on a sharp stone, cutting your foot, is clearly dukkha, dukkha dukkata. This is a moment of suffering per se. And there's also mental suffering, grief, sense of loss, sense of anguish. These are dukkha dukkata. So this is dukkha associated with unpleasant feeling. Dukkha viparinama is the dukkha of changeableness, and that's the kind of dukkha that's associated with pleasant feeling. So even the most enjoyable experiences, the most pleasant objects that we encounter are dukkha, but they're dukkha in this sense of viparinama, which points out the aspect that they're not lasting, they fall away. But I think is also important here is the aspect that any phenomena in the conditioned world, no matter how enjoyable or blissful it might be, is imperfect and ultimately unsatisfying. that the mind cannot be satisfied fully by any conditioned object. This is the dukkha that's associated with pleasant feeling. That there's an aspect of dukkha in the imperfection, in the incompleteness of pleasant moments. Dukkha sankata is dukkha as an inherent phenomenon. So this is the type of dukkha associated primarily with neutral feeling. That there's inherently a imperfection, a provisional nature associated with each moment. One of the things that's important to understand in thinking about this is that dukkha is inherent in the objects. It's not something that we impose on reality with our mind. This is one of the ways I think in which it has been misunderstood. Some people have presented Buddhist teachings in a way that implies that the problem is entirely subjective, that the world is perfect as it is, we're just seeing it wrongly somehow. This is not the teaching of the Buddha. The Buddha taught that the conditioned realm is inherently imperfect, impermanent, is breaking up, unsatisfying. These are inherent fundamentally to the object. It's not something that we impose on reality with our perception. In fact, not seeing the inherent imperfection of things is classed as a hallucination, vipallasa, or meaning a perversion of view. We're seeing things wrongly if we don't see them in this way, as flawed. Now, this is part of the very fabric of reality. And it's not a value judgment. It's not a moral judgment. It's just a statement of the way things are. The very fact of objects, whether external or internal, whether sentient objects or insentient objects, the very fact that they exist, that they're manifest, that they're functional in the universe, is an inherent flaw. It's the only way they can manifest is through partiality. It's part of the fact of being in existence. The fact of motion, of change, of life, of existence, of reality is this constant rubbing. This is what Thanissaro means when he translates dukkha as stress. He explains it someplace. It's actually quite a good suggestion, but it's misunderstood by people. I think it's unfortunate because when you hear it, you think psychological stress. And he's quite clear in his explanation in why he chose stress. He says it's not in the psychological sense, but in the engineering sense. Stress, like the stress in two members of a suspension bridge are in stress. You balance the stress that holds the thing up. That mechanical parts in a machine are under stress, and they have to be engineered to be strong enough to take the stress because they're rubbing, wearing, pulling, pushing. And this is what's meant by his use of the word stress to translate dukkha. Because the elements of reality are constantly rubbing, stressing, pushing, pulling against each other. And it's this activity that constitutes reality as we know it. Things would not be able to be in existence unless they were in some sense imperfect, partial, incomplete. The expression of phenomena in manifestation is itself a kind of a incompleteness, is a kind of a brokenness of the totality. So this is very fundamental to the very fabric of reality as we experience it. And this is dukkha. That's why we use the term conditioned reality. Perhaps the fundamental distinction is between conditioned reality and the unconditioned. The unconditioned is nibbana. There is no dukkha. It's transcended this reality. So it's transcended the dualities of existence and non-existence. It's transcended manifestation. It doesn't experience this incompleteness, this suffering, this imperfection. And contrasted to that is the ordinary experience of the conditioned realm, conditioned reality, meaning that things are subject to cause and effect, that things are inherently imperfect, partial, things are inherently incomplete. Nothing exists in isolation. No phenomena, no mind moment, no being, no object. Nothing can exist entirely as an isolated unit. The idea of a discrete object is just a mental abstraction that we can use to make sense of the universe. Everything only exists as reflections and results and causes. This is the web of interdependence. The dependent origination extended to infinity, that all objects are inherently dependent on other objects. And the web is very complex and is actually incomprehensible in all its refinement. But it means that any particular thing that we define as a discrete object is simply a transient node in this shifting web of reality. Nothing exists from its own side. Nothing is inherently real on its own, discretely. In Huayan Buddhism, one of the schools of Chinese Buddhism that emphasizes in particular the teachings around interdependence, one of the images they use to illustrate this is Indra's net. This is the king of the gods, Indra. In his palace, he has, as a ornament, he has this magical net. It's a weave of very fine fibers that cross-hatch each other in 3 dimensions. And whenever the fibers cross, at that place is a jewel, a multifaceted jewel. And if you look in the face of any one of the facets of the jewel, you see the entirety of the net reflected, including all the tiny jewels. And if you can focus your vision in to one of these reflected jewels, you'll see the entire net again reflected in an infinite regress. That everything is reflected in everything else, and no point is independent. Well, this is Indra's net, as is a image or a representation of the interdependency of all reality. And when we try and look at any discrete object, which in Abhidhamma you use the technical term Dhamma to represent a mind moment, a discrete object. When we look at a discrete object, this is where we see the essence of dukkha, because we see it's incomplete, it's imperfect, it's only real or operative in relationship to other dhammas, to other objects. It has causes, and it can itself act as a condition for subsequent arisings. And it never comes to a point of completion. The process never comes to a point of completion or perfection. It's a continual turning, shifting, churning of phenomena. The Buddha talked about three fundamental characteristics of reality. That one of them is dukkha, which we have been talking about. The second is anicca, which is impermanence, which is the facet of phenomena that nothing persists. Everything is transient. In the Abhidhamma way of looking at things, dhammas, individual dhammas, the fundamental moments of reality, arise and cease instantaneously. And at that level of reality, no discrete object ever changes, because it simply arises and ceases momentarily. So there's a saying in Abhidhamma that motion, meaning physical motion, is not possible, because what we perceive as motion is simply subsequent arising in adjacent locations. The third characteristic is that of emptiness, voidness, or not self, that nothing exists from its own side. Everything is intrinsically empty of self-substance. Yeah. And all these three characteristics are related. They're all aspects of the same fabric of reality, as being a shifting web of interdependency. And if we can transcend the conditioned realm and experience nibbana, then in the unconditioned, the characteristics of dukkha and anicca do not apply. But nibbana is also not self or void. So that is the most universal characteristic. The emptiness, sunya, is the most universal characteristic because it applies to both the conditioned and the unconditioned. But if things are going to be manifest, if we're going to have a conditioned existence, then it intrinsically has to be impermanent, and it has to be dukkha. It has to be suffering, imperfect, or however we want, whichever aspect we want to focus on. The Buddha built his whole teaching around this fundamental reality. He begins with the first noble truth, which is the truth of dukkha. Dukkha araya saccang, the noble truth of dukkha. And he defines dukkha in this case as what is dukkha. He says it's birth, aging, death, sickness, lamentation, grief, despair. So covering physical and mental aspects. Being separated from what you desire and being attached to what you do not desire. And finally, these 5 aggregates are dukkha. The 5 aggregates being the body and mind. So all of reality, all of experiential reality is dukkha. All conditioned reality is dukkha. So with that first noble truth, he lays out, expresses the problem. The structure of the Four Noble Truths is based on ancient Indian medical texts. This Buddha playing, as he often did, with conventional forms and giving them a higher meaning. So the first Noble Truth is the expression of the symptom. This is how they would lay out the medical text. It would be symptom, causality, prognosis, and cure. So the symptom of our existence is dukkha. And the cause of dukkha is given as craving, which has a specific meaning in this context as craving for sense pleasure, craving for being, and craving for not being. And this covers 3 realms of conditioned existence: the sense desire realm, the form realm, and the formless. So essentially, because of this motive energy of desire and these specific modalities of desire, we come into being and we experience suffering. So this is a way of expressing that samsara is actually something we do. It's an activity of mind driven by craving. We come into manifestation. And to attempt to fulfill the mind with experiences either in the sense sphere or in the sphere of form or the sphere of the formless, it doesn't matter. There's still an underlying craving for experience. And the experiences are intrinsically imperfect, suffering, changing, dependently arisen. So there's no ultimately winning position in that. In the words of the old song, it's staying up till dawn, playing solitaire with a deck of 51. There's no winning hand. The third noble truth is the end of suffering is a transcendence. And this is the prognosis. And the text in a medical text would say either this disease you usually die, or this disease you can be cured, or something in between. This disease will leave you crippled, or whatever. But the prognosis here is a good one. It says that it can be cured. There is an end of suffering. This is a realization of the unconditioned. And it's when we stop playing the game. As the expression in the original statement is that this end of suffering is experienced when the craving is put aside. When there's no craving, then the end of suffering can be found. So we have to transcend that push into manifestation. And the fourth noble truth is the truth leading to the end of the path, leading to the end of dukkha. It lays out a methodical method, eight aspects: right view, right intention or thought, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right energy, right mindfulness, and right concentration, or right samadhi. This is a specific path of practice that leads to the end of suffering. This corresponds in a medical text to the section on treatment. So this is what we have to do. Also, regarding the First Noble Truth, the Buddha said that we should make the effort to understand dukkha. And then with the Third Noble Truth, he said we should make the effort to experience or realize or penetrate nibbana. He used a different verb. So this is quite significant because we cannot understand nibbana, although we can know it in another sense. We can experience it directly. We can't encompass it with the ordinary mind and understand it, but we can do that with the conditioned realm. The Buddha, in fact, charged us to do so, that the conditioned realm, the realm of dukkha and anicca and anatta, the realm of the dependent origination, the realm of birth, death, and rebirth, the realm of karma. This is all the conditioned realm, and this is something that we can and should make an effort to encompass with the mind and understand and to make sense of. And to see things correctly, to see things according to reality and not otherwise, is a result of direct observation, methodical insight practice, and knowing the phenomena as they arise in their own nature as they actually are. And that's to see things according to their fundamental characteristics, to see the dukkha, anicca, anatta. If we don't see things in this way, if we see things as perfect, as wonderful, and complete in their own nature, as abiding, as permanent, as intrinsically real with their own self-inherent substance, this is classified as hallucination or perversion of view, is probably a more literal way of saying it. A vipallasa. The vipallasas are seeing things wrongly, so being corrupted in view. So it's to fall into confusion, and it's to be caught in the snares of samsara, and it's to experience again and again suffering. A very real result of seeing things correctly is that one becomes more peaceful, one becomes actually happier. This is kind of one of the seemingly paradoxical aspects of the teaching. As I said at the outset, people exposed to Buddhist teachings initially, they often think, oh, it's a pessimistic sort of a teaching. It's kind of miserable, sort of, you're always looking at suffering and death and, grief and despair. And so. But the result of looking at things realistically is that one is more at peace and one is happier. That a very real, I would say like a partial result, a benefit here and now, short of the ultimate goal, but a benefit here and now is that one enjoys more fully the pleasant experiences that come in one's life. Because all our lives are a mix of pleasant, unpleasant, and neutral. And when we experience a pleasant occurrence, enjoyable sense objects, enjoyable thought formations, and we can experience them fully as they are and not feel disappointed. If you expect things are going to be perfect, if you expect they're going to last and abide, you're going to endlessly suffer because they're never going to do that. But if you experience them just as they are in this moment as good enough, here they are, this is it, this is good, but it's not perfect, it's not going to last, but it's good right now, then you can enjoy it as fully as possible in the present moment. and then carry on when it's gone. You just carry on. You don't suffer a grief. So this is one of the, the minor benefits, the minor fruits here and now, but it's something that's very, very real. And you find people in Buddhist cultures, I think, generally enjoy life. They have a cheerful attitude. They're not pessimistic or gloomy as someone from the outside with no knowledge, just looking initially at the teachings, might think. It's not a pessimistic view of life, it's a realistic one. Things are just as they are. And we don't need to increase our suffering when bad things happen by having feelings of regret or unfairness or why me. That's an unrealistic addition to unavoidable suffering. Likewise, when pleasant things arise, we don't need to let ourselves feel disappointed because they're not perfect or they're not lasting enough. They're just as they are. So this is understanding dukkha sets you in that mode of realism, of a realistic view of conditions, not looking at the world through rose-colored glasses, but seeing things as they actually are in their own nature. And this eventually sets you free.